everybody, and welcome to episode 81 of On the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jodi, and I'm the editor-in-chief of AutoTrader.
And my name is Dan Alika, and I am AutoTrader's road test editor.
Dan, as the road test editor of AutoTrader,
yes,
what is something that you've driven recently that you've loved?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think this week, actually, I'm driving the Land Rover Defender 130.
Which you love.
Which is like, it's cool because it's so quirky. It's really long. And I don't know. It's like the 110 was cool. I remember when the 110 and the 90 came out together. So the 90 is the 2-door. The 110 is the 4-door. That's a 5 or 7 passenger. So you could get an optional third row. And then a couple years later, Land Rover came out with the 130, which is this extended version, but the wheelbase is the same. So you get about, I think it's like 13 and a half inches more length bumper to bumper, but it's all
trunk
behind.
Space.
Yeah. And it just looks kind of silly, which I love. But yeah, it's smooth, it's comfortable, it's capable. And so I would say that that's something that I have enjoyed driving.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, you're taking it camping this weekend too, so report back on how that goes.
Yeah, I think it's a good vehicle. And this area that me and my buddies go camping is kind of remote. It's like you used to be able to take this old road to get in that you could get back there with, just about anything. Maybe a couple kind of bumps and scrapes. But now that road had flooded, and it was actually funny. There was like this little there was some water and there was a beaver dam. And my buddies and I were always like, oh, if that beaver dam gives way, like this place is going to flood. And then this would have been back in like 2012. I just remember that year being one of those weird ones where we had a lot of rain in the spring and a rapid warm up. So there was a super fast thaw, and we went to go camping. And my buddy still to this day has a Jeep Wrangler LJ. So remember it was a 2-door Wrangler, but it was longer. And I don't remember what the lift kit is on it, but it's like quite a bit higher, and it's on 32s or something like that. And the water was up to the headlights on his lifted
Oh my God.
Jeep.
So that beaver dam did wash out too. Yeah. Oh no, it happened.
And so now we have to take this other road, which has this like pretty gnarly hill climb that you have to get up and whatever. So you do need something with like a little bit more capability. And this one I thought, a couple guys are going to be riding up with me. So something with a little bit more space and doing something that I know a lot of people think of. They see high priced SUVs, and we get comments like this on our videos sometimes when we, review or do first drives of expensive SUVs. And sometimes I even wonder, like, who's spending $160,000 and offer, but people do.
Especially with Defenders.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it firsthand. Those people are nuts. Like I met a guy who drove his Land Rover Defender from like the tip of Mexico all the way up to like Tuktoyaktuk.
Oh yeah, that's like a relatively common run for overlanders. Yeah. But I also get, people that, and I mean, they're always armchair warriors, right? But it's like people that throw shade at people for driving, even Jeep Wranglers, and they're like, they don't even use them. And it's like, but then they drive a pickup truck that they don't use, or like, I don't know, a Subaru BRZ that it's like they don't take to the track. It's like, first of all, let people do whatever they want to do with their vehicles. But, something like the Defender, I'm like, people really do use these things the way they were meant to be used. And it's nice to be able to put one through at least a little bit of its paces.
Yeah, I feel like it'll make your camping trip that much more rewarding.
I mean, we'll see how it goes, right? It's always, I've taken some stuff back there that has, outperformed expectations. I've never had anything like really disappoint. So, hopefully this isn't the first. And I've done some gnarly stuff in the Defender in the past, so I'm not worried about it from that perspective. But the space is the big one for me. Having all that room with, we'll have like 3 guys in that vehicle, each one of us with like a full-size cooler and all our gear. Like we will fill that thing right to the ceiling.
I mean, I love that. That's what it was made for. So I love to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so today's episode, Dan and I are going to be chatting about features to look for if you're a parent and you're maybe looking at buying your new driver a car.
Whether, I don't know, if you're, let's say it's a teen, maybe somebody who's going away to school, or, it's yourself and you've never owned a car before And we just thought, like, what are some things that you should look out for in that situation? You're buying that car and you want it to be, safe and reliable and all that good stuff, of course. But it's like we want to get into the more, a little bit of like a deeper dive into what you should look for and maybe things to avoid as well.
Yeah, so we're going to go through some like misconceptions. I think the first one is really that like a lot of parents are like, oh, I'm just going to get them something old and cheap just because, they don't deserve something brand new and luxury yet, which I get. But here's why I think that might not be the best decision. It's safety, right? Like those old cars don't necessarily come with all the latest and greatest safety equipment.
Yeah, when we look at like crash standards, they've obviously improved over the years. And so more, modern vehicles do tend to adhere to a higher, not only because they have to, but also organizations like the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, I don't think get enough credit for what they have done, because that is a not-for-profit that's run, as the name would suggest, by the insurance industry. It's a bunch of insurance companies that fund this organization that does crash testing, as well as, just a bunch of other testing. It's not just them slamming that sled into new vehicles. But the IIHS has done so much to advance automotive safety when government hasn't been willing to step up, so to speak, when government hasn't, made regulations to address crash testing. But basically, it's almost like the IIHS shames automakers into meeting new standards. So I really respect and appreciate what that organization does. And that's a great place to start. And you can also use that website and go back. So if you go to IIHS.org and if you go to the safety ratings section on the page, which is really easy to find, you can actually search by year. So it's not just the new vehicles that are on there. If you want to know what from whatever 5-10 years ago met at that time was, let's say, a top safety pick in whatever segment you're shopping, you can filter by year and take a look at what vehicles have met those ratings. But there are some that are just, have been consistent winners over the years. And I mean, Toyota Corolla obviously is a great vehicle. And we all know the Corolla as a great car, regardless of whether you've been driving, for 6 months or 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
It is a great choice, but also because it meets those safety standards.
And it's still very affordable, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need to spend a lot of money to get great safety features.
Yeah.
And the Corolla comes standard with basically everything Toyota offers, which is amazing.
Now, I would say over the last, maybe 5 years, that's been the case, that Toyota's been equipping its advanced safety suite across its lineup. But just to bring it back to like the very basics, if you don't know where to start, this is one that I've been recommending for years and years, and I will continue to do so. It's harder on the new market, but there's still a good selection on the used market. If you're buying, let's say it's your teenager, their first car, and you're worried about distracted driving, the number one piece of advice I can give is get them a manual. Not only is that a great life skill to be able to drive a car with a manual transmission, but it's a lot harder for them to handle their phone while they're driving if they also have to be shifting gears. It's just one of those, like, that's science, you can't, there's only so much you can do. And sure, I mean, we've seen crazy stories of people doing all kinds of stuff behind the wheel, but I mean, mitigate the risk, maybe not eliminate it outright, but it is much tougher for you to be handling your phone while you also have to downshift. Otherwise, you're going to stall, embarrass yourself, and, So that's my number one piece of advice.
I mean, I love that. I think a manual transmission is just such a great life skill to have because in other places in the world, they still use them all the time, right? Yeah. So if your kid was going to Europe or something and needed to rent a car.
Although that's becoming less of a thing,
globally,
right?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. And I mean, part of it is just demand being down for manuals, but also so when you and I were young, manuals were
many moons ago.
Yes, back when Back when you were young and
in the 1900s.
what did the person say about you when you were young and nerdy?
Oh, I used to look young and nerdy.
Yeah. Back when Jodi was young and nerdy, the manual cars tended to be more efficient than automatics. But then automatic transmissions, especially with continuously variable transmissions, they have become more efficient traditionally than manuals. So for automakers looking to meet fleet emissions average, it makes more sense. So I don't think there's one single reason that you can point to, but yeah, demand is down. So in Europe, I mean, I remember when I was a kid and going to the UK, it was like you had to pay more. There was a premium for automatics, and there were also just fewer rentals that were automatic. So like you might not even be able to find one if you wanted. But now it's a lot more common. But still, I mean, regardless, who knows? If your kid goes out to a party with a bunch of friends and the person who drove ends up, having a few drinks and they can't drive anymore, it's another risk mitigation if another person in the car has the ability to drive manual, then there's less likelihood that person who's been drinking is going to drive manual. But if there's no one else that can drive, kids, not just kids, people make dumb decisions, right? So
that's a great point. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so if you can eliminate those risks, then this is another good reason why your child should learn how to drive manual.
Okay, when we're talking about safety features specifically, what are the ones that new parents should be looking out for?
This is okay. I have mixed feelings about this because in terms of advanced safety, I don't like that they've become crutches for people.
Yeah.
And this goes back when we did our hot takes episode a few episodes ago, and Steve Behennick had that great bit about how, these emergency assistance features should just randomly cut out just to make sure that you're still paying attention. And I mean,
he said they should call it the Darwin Mobile or something.
Yeah. And as silly as that is, I mean, I get his point, and that is something I advocate for, not becoming overly reliant on safety features. But if you look at them the way that they're supposed to be looked at, which is that, they're a last line of defense. You're still in control of the vehicle. It's still your responsibility to keep yourself and other road users safe. But let's be honest. We've all been in those situations where, we check our mirrors, we go to make a lane change, and we don't notice that somebody has crept into a blind spot, or maybe was there all along and you just didn't really notice. So having blind spot monitoring to me is, if there were one advanced safety feature that I would want, if the car gods said like you can only pick one, I think blind spot monitoring with like evasive steering assist would probably be the one. I
think that's one of the best ones available. Yeah. I also really like junction turning assist, which is becoming more common now.
Yeah. So guys, for those of you who are unaware, and there are other names for this, but junction turn is just kind of the easiest way to sum it up, because it means if you are at an intersection, otherwise known as a junction, and let's say you're turning left, when you have your left signal activated, your forward collision warning camera is monitoring further up the road, and it will warn if a vehicle is traveling towards you and you go to make that left-hand turn. Because, if you're across the intersection from you is a pickup truck or a transport truck and you can't see because they're turning left in the opposite direction you are, this is, again, that last line of defense. It should still be up to you to make sure you're not about to turn out into oncoming traffic, but this will support you in that decision-making process. So yeah, I like that as well. Lane departure warning more than lane keep assist. I think that's one of those things where, and this is something cool. I think like GM, I don't know if it necessarily got the love that it should have, because it's also hard to praise a feature if it's not more common. But GM's teen driver suite. So I would say this probably had to come out a decade ago.
It's been around for a while.
And what it is with, so basically, any GM built in the last 10 years can have it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's featured, although it did become more standardized across the lineup. But Teen Driver gave parents parental control where they could remotely monitor where the vehicle was going. There were geo-fenced areas where they would get alerts if if the car was taken outside of a boundary, speed limit alerts, and then also report cards. So instead of just in real time getting a notification saying, hey, they've left the area that you don't want them to, you would also just be able to look at a report card at the end of the week and say, hey, you exceeded the speed limit a few times. And so that is something where I know it sounds a little big brothery, but I also understand, like parents love their kids.
Yeah, and I feel like driving is a privilege. And if you're doing things that kind of, that are not the rules that you had agreed with your parents, like they should know about that, right? It's like
that. Remember that when we did that one with the Am I the Jerk? And it was like that person that, took the keys away from their kid. Like, because it's like.
Because that kid was texting and driving and blowing through stop signs.
Yeah. And it's, it's that same sort of thing of like, what would you rather have? Your parent in the car, in the passenger seat beside you, or them be able to keep an eye on what you're doing remotely? I think we would all like that extra bit of freedom as teenagers. But that is one of those things where I wish GM would have put like an open patent on that and let other automakers implement it in their vehicles, like Ford did with the secure keypad thing.
That no one else uses.
A few of them do.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Accessory-wise, like Toyota and stuff. But yeah, it's just like one of those things where it's hard. Again, it's hard to like if Toyota was able to offer that by whether it's an open patent or whether it's like paying a licensing fee, I feel like other brands would be on board with sharing that because it has benefits.
I think so too, and especially because all cars are basically connected to the internet now anyway, that it would make it really easy to do that.
And it's just, but it's such a great. That's one that I have just always loved. I mean, and it's been discontinued anyways, but it's like you're not buying a Chevy Malibu just because it has this teen driver technology. Right. And yes, other vehicles in the lineup still have it to this day. But the point being that like it is limited in its scope. If you just don't like GM products, or there's nothing that really suits because to me, like a minivan is a great. Lots of families, need the space of a minivan. They let their kids take the minivan out as opposed to maybe they've got something a little nicer in the driveway as well. Which brings us to our next point on this. Bigger isn't always better when it comes to safety.
That's very true. And you have a very interesting story about this that I would love for you to tell our listeners.
So this was years ago, where I'm pretty sure it was like pandemic, like no haircut era Dan, where it was like not a good look. So I wouldn't recommend going back on the YouTube channel to find the video, but I was reviewing a Jeep Wrangler, and it was a Wrangler Rubicon 2-door in that the color was called Bikini, and it's that like teal color. Really liked it. So we were shooting up near like Blue Mountain.
Okay.
I knew some trails up that way. So we were shooting up there, and these two women had come. They were walking their dogs, and they had come down the trail and started chatting with us. And the lady saw the AutoTrader plate cover, so she was asking me, and I said, yeah, like, that's where we work, and reviewing it. And she's like, oh, that's so great. She goes, I actually just bought my daughter one of these. And I was like, oh, like, wow, that's a nice gift from
Very generous gift.
And she was like, yeah, well, they had, I don't remember what the other car was, but she's like, oh yeah, they had whatever it was and got into a crash, lost control. It was wintertime. And went into the ditch. And so as soon as that happened and I knew I had to replace it, I wanted something really safe. So I got them a new Wrangler. And I'm like, that's not the right call. Not only because they're tippy, and they're not the greatest vehicles to drive. They wander a lot. And if I were putting a new driver behind the wheel of a vehicle, I would not put them behind the wheel of a Jeep Wrangler, because it's kind of challenging to drive. But then even just more simply than that, the only vehicle in double IHS testing to ever roll over during a crash test is the current generation Jeep Wrangler. And the story isn't just that it rolled once and it was a fluke. So how it works, the double IHS buys new vehicles and it doesn't go to the automaker first, because they don't want any chance that it's manipulated in any sort of way. So they go to a random dealer somewhere in the US, they buy that vehicle, they avoid low volume, luxury vehicles. So you're not going to find double IHS testing of a Porsche 911, but most mainstream and even like into the premium market, more popular vehicles. They'll buy it, they bring it back to their facility in Virginia. They do all kinds of testing, all kinds of analysis, right down to like checking the seat belt, like the latch anchors, to see how easy it is to install car seats. And then the last thing they do, because it destroys the car, is they have this sled. And I've witnessed this crash test in person. And you stand on this bridge, and this sled comes, like it's a cable drawn sled, and it slams into the vehicle. And it's, even though you're watching it and you know it's coming, it's a very jarring experience.
Right. And they do this to simulate a car crash, right?
Yeah. So they'll do like a moderate overlap where it's like, 30% of the vehicle, and it would simulate something like a junction turn collision where you're kind of nosed out and somebody comes and smashes into your vehicle. So I don't remember the exact crash test that this happened in, but IHS testing slammed the sled into the Wrangler, and the Wrangler rolled onto its side. Stellantis was like, this can't be, we've tested internally. There's no way this is, you need to retest it. Now how the IHS works is if you request a retest, you as an automaker have to pay to do, because they're like, we're not spending our own money to buy another one. Give us the 30 grand or whatever. So Stellantis gave the IHS money, went out, bought another Wrangler. Stellantis people were in the building and watched it, and it happened again. Like, then I think they had done, because you can also do like private testing with the IHS where you can basically like book the facility and bring your vehicles there or whatever. And it happened multiple times. So buying a Wrangler because you think it's safe is not, it's there's that false sense of security that comes with something that's four-wheel drive. Yes, I know now you can buy modern Wranglers with automatic four-wheel drive, but if you are going to go down that path, first of all, I would recommend all-wheel drive and not four-wheel drive, because running four-wheel drive, it's not good for the vehicle to be out on the highway doing 120 kilometers an hour.
And also kill your gas bills.
Yeah. So it's like, that idea that because it's a 4x4 and, because it looks kind of macho and stuff, that doesn't mean it's a safe vehicle.
But I'll also see parents get their kids or want to get their kids an SUV or a crossover with all-wheel drive and not get them winter tires.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me, because winter tires are like way more important to safe driving than all-wheel drive.
Yeah. It's, come to think of it, aside from my Outback, that's the only all-wheel drive vehicle I've ever owned. Everything else I've had front-wheel drive, I've had rear-wheel drive, and, winter tires matter. That's the difference. This goes back to just like the question of, if I could only pick one safety feature, what would I pick? And that would be blind spot monitoring. If I had to pick between proper tires and extra traction, because guys, don't forget, like all-wheel drive does not mean all-wheel stop. You're not slowing down any quicker because you have all-wheel drive. And that is the scenario where the tires matter more. Taking off from a stop, whatever. Even in the worst case scenario, if you just can't get up the hill, nobody's behind you, put it in reverse and back out of the situation that you're in. But you cannot do that if you're trying to slow down and your vehicle is skidding out of control because you don't have the right tires. There's no do-over. This isn't Forza Motorsport where you can hit reverse and rewind and back up the situation. It's like, that matters. Tires matter. So I would 100%, if I for the rest of my life only drove front-wheel drive but had winter tires, that would be totally fine with me.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you need all-wheel drive is a misconception, even in Canada where it's so incredibly popular. So yeah, don't do something just because you think it's safe. Do the thing that is actually safe, like the right tires, like the right size of vehicle. Don't buy your kid something that is a big pickup truck for a kid. That's a lot of vehicle for them to handle.
That sounds a bit crazy for me, just because like if you're a new driver, you're not really familiar yet with things like parallel parking or
learning. Like Jodi and I are lucky that we do what we do and we drive so many different vehicles that, we've become very quick at adjusting to, understanding the dimensions of your vehicle and being able to maneuver that vehicle based on its size. But I remember as a kid, like, because my parents were big on that. No, like, your parallel parking isn't just like learn it for the test and that's that. It's something that you should continue to do. I'm big on backing into parking spots still to this day, because I always say to people, if you back into a spot, nobody can jump out from, behind you. Whereas if you're backing out of a spot, there could be a pedestrian, there could be a kid, there could be another vehicle. So it's you're mitigating the risk of having some sort of obstruction or a person that ends up behind you. I remember as a young driver backing into parking spots and getting out of the car and going like, oh man, there's still 6 feet behind me because I didn't back in enough. So again, like, knowing the dimensions of your vehicle is something that you develop over time. So getting your kid behind the wheel of this enormous pickup truck just seems like you're setting them up for failure, and you're going to make them uncomfortable. When new drivers, you should be making them as comfortable as possible, making them as confident as possible. So to me, getting them a right-sized vehicle with the right amount of features and the right safety equipment is the key, not something big that you think, oh, if they get in a collision, they have a better chance of surviving. I mean, cars are safe regardless. We're lucky that we have so many regulations in this country that vehicles are built safer than they are in other markets of the world. So that to me is not the side of it that you should be looking at. You should be looking at something that's manageable, maneuverable, and just easy for them to get comfortable with.
But also more affordable, right? You got to remember that the bigger the car, the more inefficient it's going to be, right? So if you really want to help set your kid up for success and like keep those bills low, like something efficient and safe and reliable is what you want to go for, right?
Absolutely.
Do we have any other tips on like illusion of safety versus real safety?
No, I think all-wheel drive is the big one, and size is the big one. Those are like, for me, the two that are, and they're so common.
Right.
It's just constant.
And this has nothing to do with anything we're talking about, but I remember a buddy of mine had a daughter, and he was like, when it's time for me to buy her a car, I'm getting her a coupe. I'm like, why? She's like, no back seats.
I mean, fair.
Which I thought was so funny. But yeah, I guess that's a concern that some parents have to think about.
To each their own.
Yeah, and we'll leave it at that. Okay. And then before our Ask an Expert, here's a message from your friends at AutoTrader. Having trouble finding your perfect car at the perfect price? The answer is AutoTrader. Car prices are dropping across Canada, and AutoTrader has hundreds of thousands of new and used cars to choose from. Get a great deal on your perfect car by visiting AutoTrader today. So today's Ask an Expert comes, it was a comment left on our YouTube channel. And this is what it says. If you're really not worried about the resale value, would you recommend getting an EV for like 3 to 4 years on the secondhand market? Which one and why? So we're going to answer this in 2 different ways because I'm not really sure what this means.
Yeah. I think, like, when I read that or hear that, it sounds like, if I wasn't concerned about resale and I only wanted to keep a car for 3 to 4 years, would I be worried about that? No. But then my advice there would be lease a new EV. If you're only going to keep it for 3 to 4 years, like, I mean, unless you've got some great kind of trek plan to drive it across Canada and it's going to exceed the mileage limit, leasing a new EV for 3 years could conceivably be cheaper than buying a used one.
And that could be a really great option on the secondhand market, or a new one.
Yeah.
But if you did want to buy a secondhand market, because EVs do depreciate quite a bit, so you could save a lot.
And like reading it that way, if it's like, if you like, would you recommend getting a 3 or 4 year old EV? If that's the question, yeah, of course I would.
Yeah. So here's why. So battery depreciation, turns out it's not as big as a deal that as automakers were initially thinking it might be, or people in general.
Because people think of vehicles like phones, right?
Right.
And they think of, well, my phone battery isn't as good as when it was new. And it's like, yeah, of course, all batteries, there's a certain bit of degradation involved, but also the way you cycle your phone's battery isn't the same as a vehicle's battery. A vehicle's battery is also more robust because it's exposed to elements and it's in a vehicle, first of all. And yeah, research is now showing that they're far exceeding the life expectancy that was set out even like just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that EVs that are 3 to 4 years old, a lot of them will still have warranty left on them, which is great. Like if you're not feeling sure about it, that warranty should really put you at ease.
Because a lot of those battery warranties are into like the 8-10 year range, whereas the comprehensive warranty for the vehicle itself might only be like 4 years. So automakers tried to reassure buyers that, hey, these components, there's nothing to worry about. So there's lots of warranty coverage. So would I consider a 3 to 4 year old EV? Absolutely. Ones that, without knowing what you're looking for in terms of size, what you need to do with the vehicle, one that I'm still a big fan of ever since I drove it, the Chevy Bolt.
I was thinking that too, actually.
Yeah, it's a really good vehicle. And I know that there were some battery fire concerns, which is, effectively what killed the Bolt. But know that that situation was addressed. And I've talked about this before, but if you missed it, basically the batteries, the supplier, when they were putting the individual cells, so an EV's battery is a bunch of cells put into like a big box basically. And there's supposed to be like a little filament between each cell to make sure that they're not contacting each other. Well, it turned out that when they were putting those cells in, the filaments could fold and then the cells were like arcing and whatever. And that's where the fire risk came from. Once they found that out, they replaced those batteries. They replaced the cells, made sure everything was cool. So I would be confident to buy a Chevy Bolt.
And you probably get a wicked deal on it too. I imagine they're extremely affordable today.
Absolutely. So
and still under warranty.
Yeah. So that would definitely be on my, regardless of how you read this question, obviously not that if you're buying new, but it's like if you're asking about a secondhand vehicle that you're only going to keep for a few years and you don't care about resale value, yeah, go for it. Buy a Bolt. If you want to buy a 3 or 4 year old EV, yeah, go ahead and buy a Bolt. Like either way, I think it's a safe bet. But if you need something bigger, I don't know, email us again and let us know. But that's kind of would be my jumping off point.
Great. Thank you so much for your question. If any of you would like to ask Dan or I a question, you can email expert@trader.ca. But that wraps up this episode.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us. Drive safe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.